From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Shari. Now, one thing that often happens is that there's a story that's in the news for a couple of days. We all care about it, we all follow the details, but we don't follow up. So I wanted to start tonight's show by telling you that there was a major funeral in Queensland today, and it was for Vilene White. Vilene is the mother and grandmother who was stabbed to death in front of her grandchild. The funeral today was quite significant and quite well attended for the most obvious of reasons. But you remember that this is a lady who parked her car like anyone else does on a Saturday after quickly going to the shops before coming home for dinner. Grandkid in the back seat, she goes up into the shop and then goes, oh, hang on, I've locked my car, goes back and then is stabbed. Now, I know the court process is playing out, so I say no more than that, but this is just a profoundly normal Australian, a normal Australian loved by their family, a family that, of course, has been torn apart, and a family that it's important to check in on because they are no different than our families about what would happen if the worst possible thing had happened to the matriarchs of our family. Their interviews on a current affair with the husband who's legally blind but heartbroken and will be for the rest of his life, and a daughter who's trying to be as strong as her mother. Well, today the funeral took place, and as I said, there was a very significant number of people who turned up. One of the images that has stuck with me throughout the day is the image of her husband, surrounded by people, knowing that at a moment in time that he wouldn't be with his wife anymore, but no one imagining that this would be the reason and the way. For Vilene, she was a very deep person of faith, a person who led Bible study groups, who loved her community, loved her God, and of course loved her family. One of her daughters spoke at the funeral today, and the memories of Vilene are deeply personal to the family, but are very familiar to all of us of suburban Australia.
Everyone was always welcome and made to feel loved. No one was left out. Everyone was always felt welcome.
She loved, she prayed, she encouraged, she brought hope to the lost and the lonely in the world.
Mum was a real character at times, doing the infamous family stuff of Donald Duck impersonations, so laughing at funny animal videos. She enjoyed playing cards, doing gardening and going for walks, always looked forward to family get-togethers.
I feel robbed. The family and friends feel robbed. We were supposed to grow old together.
One of her friends feeling exactly the same torment as the family, but again, one that all of us would feel. Everyone knows someone like Vilene. Many of the people watching this program right now, you are like Vilene. Also, a message that came very strong today at the funeral was that justice must be done and greater changes must happen when it comes to the attitudes in and around crime in Queensland.
This is a catalyst for change in our lives, in our communities, in our nation. This is how we want Mum remembered, the legacy of change.
Vilene White, missed by her family forever, loved by her friends forever, missed by her community forever. Strength and love to her friends, to her family, and may she now rest in peace. To the politics that will no doubt play out over the next couple of days, because there is, of course, going to be this by-election on Saturday in Frankston. Now, we know that this is supposedly a knife-edge contest. The original polling was 52-48 in favour of the Labor Party. Then there was one poll that suggested it was 51-49 in favour of the Liberal Party. A new poll has come out tonight suggesting that there is a very significant, almost a quarter of all voters that are undecided. Now, I don't know if that means they break late for the government or they break late for the opposition, but either way, we're in for a close one. Full coverage here on Sky News on Saturday night. Watch the count and the analysis, the swings, the blame games, the inevitable election night fights. You'll see all of that here on Saturday night. But no question, number one issue, cost of living. Now, despite the fact the reason for the by-election is the death of the Labor MP, there is an absolute opportunity for the people of this very normal part of Australia to send a message to a government that does not get it. They've got solutions for the front page, they've got solutions for the 6 p.m. news, but they don't have a solution for you. And they can tell as many people as they want that cost of living is at the front and centre of everything they do as a government, as was the talking point for ministers and MPs today when they were fanned out across television.
It is the number one issue for people, and absolutely we want to make it as easy for people as possible.
But of course they haven't. Now remember what the promise was in May of 2022, which does feel like a lifetime ago. It was that things would be lower under a Labor government. No ifs, no buts, no just in case Ukraine, no asterisks, no maybes. The promise was clear. A Labor government will lower the cost of living. Well, you know that it has been anything but. And despite the fact that the latest inflation figures are good and better compared to where they were a year or even 2 years ago, there's still a whole bunch of stuff that is way above the monthly average. This is all the stuff that government plays part of a role in. But insurance and financial services, bread and cereal products, rents, food products, alcohol and tobacco, and we all know the taxes associated with those, non-alcoholic beverages and dairy, all way above average when it comes to inflation. So if you don't need anywhere to live and you don't need anything to eat and you don't need anything to drink and you don't want to celebrate anything and you don't want to insure your house, apparently everything is fantastic. But of course, we know that all of the above are things that normal people have to do. Dunkley has an opportunity to send a message right back into the heart of the government that BS won't work. You actually have to do something. Another example of something this government has refused to do, and I hope the people of Dunkley remember going into this by-election, is of course when it comes to petrol. Now, petrol goes up and goes down compared to the global oil price, but one thing that absolutely can be controlled by the government is tax. Now, government used to charge just between 23 and 25 cents a litre for taxation. That was the case when they became the government. It is now the best part of 50 cents. In fact, they increased the tax on fuel. So despite the fact the Prime Minister says they did and are doing everything they possibly can on cost of living, no changes when it comes to the amount of tax that they are getting. You see, it's all part of the game, which is they say they're giving you a tax cut on one side, but the reality is when you go and spend that tax cut, there's little taxes that mean if you eat, if you drink, if you insure, if you put petrol in the car, then it all starts coming back your way. Also, I don't believe the government when it says that they can do everything about cost of living, because we know that at the height of cost of living, in July of last year, they took $1,500 off 10 million workers. That is a government that, while it was in surplus, did not choose to use just a sliver of the extra money for you to be able to have $1,500. But now they say that for the median worker in Dunkley, a $14 a week tax cut shows that they care. Despite the fact that they do nothing on petrol, in fact, they increase it. They do nothing on a whole series of other taxes. Oh, but you'll be okay with an extra $14 a week. How patronising. And it doesn't matter if it's $15, $22, $32 or $41 a week. It is not good enough. Let's see what happens when it comes to Dunkley. Again, the polling that is around right now, it goes everywhere from a pretty sizable Labor win to a squeaking Liberal win to a significant number of people that are undecided. Who knows what's about to happen? Dunkley, I hope you send a message, and I hope you send it hard, because this government doesn't get it. They think they can BS to people. Live coverage, 6 p.m. this Saturday. The best team in the business having a look at the Dunkley by-election. Without doubt, the greatest broken promise thus far of this government is the promise to do something about your power bills, because remember, everything will be lower when it comes to cost of living under Labor. And of course, the porky pie that the Prime Minister has absolutely broken, will not recommit to, but for some reason the rest of the media let him get away with, the central lie of the 22 campaign.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
$275 a year.
We'll get power prices down by $275 a year.
And if this is the first time you've watched us this week, can I remind everyone of what we showed you last night, an interview with our friend Laura Jays and the Prime Minister, where he repeated the same dodges that he gave to David Pemberthy on 5AA in Adelaide. This policy is dead, it is buried, it is cremated. But the media, well, the Prime Minister thinks he doesn't even have to announce that it is dead, buried and cremated.
Well, if you earn $45,000 a year, you pay little tax. It's about $4,000 a year. Those same people, Prime Minister, are still waiting for $275 off their power bills. Is that going to happen, yes or no?
Well, what you'll get as well is our energy price relief plan has made a substantial difference, not just to people's bills by lowering them,
but importantly
putting that downward pressure on inflation.
By the way, the best spin they could put on that was half of 1% of all of the inflation has been changed as a result of those multi-billion dollars that are being spent to artificially try to push down the wholesale price. But the retail price, it continues to go through the roof. Yesterday, there was details that home owners are paying $1,000 more for their power bills than actually businesses are. And we know that the cost of going from a grid that has reliably worked to the one that makes people feel better when they go to international conferences could be up to $1 trillion, according to the CSIRO. The promise of $275, gone. No accountability for it. But interestingly, another poll has dropped about what Australians' priority is when it comes to power. And surprise, surprise, we want to cut our power bills more than we want to cut our part in 1% of the world's global emissions. When asked to rank 1, 2 or 3, what should be the top energy priorities of the Australian voter, lowering energy costs is number 1 at 59%. Then it is maintaining energy reliability at 55%. And then at the back of the pack, third by a bigger margin than anything else, was about further emissions reductions. Now, again, I do not know how, I do not know why, but the polling that was there during the last election and for many years before, that when Australians are faced with a fork in the road between doing something to reduce 1% of global emissions or keeping prices low, or how much are you willing to pay to achieve it, of course, Australians always choose pocket over emissions. Again, I hope the good people of Dunkley are watching, because unless a message is actually sent to the government, it's going to be more of the same. You've got old mate Chris Bowen out and about pretending that he can put literally tens of billions, $60 billion worth of BIOS for renewable energy. He can put them off the books so they don't appear in the budget. But it's all still borrowed money. We still owe the rest of the world the best part of $1 trillion, but we'll just add an extra 60 on top of it, and then we'll say that there is a solution. This is the same bloke, of course, who wants to ban the type of car that you could drive, but then wants to also patronise you that despite the fact that he's putting a system in place that means certain cars slowly but surely will not fit the fuel standards of the country, oh, there's no ban in place. That's how stupid they think you are. I know you're not. You know you're not. But if you've got the capacity to send a message to these people via a pollster or in Dunkley on Saturday, please do it. Because otherwise they think they literally can get away with whatever the heck they want, and we will all thank them as they slowly do this in front of us. Meantime, another major business may well be about to shut down. Why? Because of the cost of energy, the cost of their power and gas bills. It's a big company that makes a whole collection of plastics in Australia, and they are seriously thinking about pulling the pin because the cost of their energy to make these products, which Australians demand, both at home and at work, well, they might disappear, as may the nickel refineries in Western Australia, as have the paper mills in Tasmania. Yet another broken promise from the Prime Minister, who breaks them by the day.
After 9 years of telling Australia's manufacturers to leave the country, we want a future made in Australia and will support manufacturers in this country.
You can tell them whatever you want. It's the actual power bills that they have to pay, which becomes a problem. Now, we all know the Prime Minister peacocks around in question time like he's got a 90-seat majority, that he'll be there for 100 terms, and there is no way that he will remove himself from office. He'll just be there forever, and everyone around him will be successful, and there'll never be a Liberal government again, and the Teals will take... You know the story. The great revolution that apparently happened after the last election. What we know, and I've been talking about this all week, that there's been a series of articles put up in a publication called The Nightly. Christopher Dorr, who used to edit the Australian newspaper, now works for them, and he has been getting right inside the inner workings of the party. We told you about how the staffers have got their head up their backside, according to the Labor insiders. We've talked about the Albanistas that are all left-wing cabal around the Prime Minister telling him he can do no wrong. Well, what about Labor insiders talking about members of Albanese's front bench? What are they saying? Well, absolutely there should be a reshuffle sooner rather than later, suggests a Labor insider. However, Albanese does not believe that any of his ministers are underperforming. And you see, that's the case because he thinks that all that matters is that the Guardian cheers him in, either the people who used to write for the Guardian who now work for him, or the Guardian on the outside cheering him along, forgiving him for all of the broken promises. The expectation that the rest of the media, everything from Channel 2 to the Channel 9 newspapers, they're all in the pocket, so it doesn't matter. He's on a campaign where he talks to as many junior members of the press gallery as possible, who of course all get glittered by the idea that they're on the inside, the Prime Minister's talking to them. I know this tactic. Why? Because I was exposed to it as a young reporter in the New South Wales government way back when of Bob Carr's. And it does have an effect on young reporters. If nothing else, then it creates a benefit of the doubt scenario, which is why so often you see much of the reporting in and around the failures of this government is always generally benefit of the doubt. Why? Because this is the first government that's ever paid attention to little old me. As for the ministers that very obviously underperform, Andrew Giles, he's hopeless. He is absolutely hopeless as the immigration minister. Now, it doesn't matter whether it was the way that he behaved in Parliament today or the way he behaved in Parliament last month or last year. This bloke has absolutely no interest in serious attitudes towards national security. He views the immigration portfolio, as he did as a shadow minister, as an opportunity to tell us how racist we all are, to go to a series of ethnic communities and make that message, as opposed to actually taking care of the broader community. We know he's the one who let the people who were forced out by the High Court back into the community without the ankle bracelets, back into hotels with no security oversights. But of course, nothing to see here. This is also the bloke who, with the clueless Claire O'Neill, gets together, passes laws, and then doesn't use a single piece of paper that those laws empower to try to put anyone of the more than 130 odd back behind bars. Not one of them. Extraordinary. Linda Burney, well, she could end up as the next Governor-General of Australia, apparently. And I can tell you what, it's not going to be based off performance. We all know that her performance during The Voice was appalling. Every opportunity she could to refer to Trumpian politics or misinformation, as opposed to just 60% of the country changing their mind from 60% who were pro at the start of the campaign to 60% who were against it. Well, let's get to some of the reviews. The Defence Minister and the frequent free flyer, that is Richard Marles. Labor insiders say he's a loyal deputy, but he's a crap Defence Minister. Politics is so unfair. One of the mean girls, Penny Wong, barely disguises absolute derision and disgust for her opponents, often in her own party. Acts tired and bored in the Senate, unchallenged by the intellectual pygmies and plonkers sitting on the opposite side of the chamber. So it's a way of saying that she's up herself. Tony Burke, according to a Labor insider, he's absolutely convinced that he's going to be Prime Minister. You see, such is the arrogance inside the machine that Tony Burke thinks Albo's there forever, then even if Chalmers takes over, I take over after Chalmers. But we are here forever, and he seriously thinks he's going to be the Prime Minister. Fair dinkum. And then, of course, there's Casanova Bowen, the bloke who every single policy he touches, it turns to dust. Every single thing he argues for ends up either costing the taxpayer more money or makes the Labor Party more unpopular. And it doesn't matter if he was the immigration minister, thousands of people coming in, the shadow treasurer, billions of dollars in extra taxes that were rejected by the Australian people, or now as the climate change minister. A Labor insider says ravens, broken mirrors, shoes on the table, upside down shoe horses. That ladder, a black cat, upright chopsticks, Harry Potter-style curses hover like a dark cloud around this bloke. Once it was stop the boats, now it's stop the SUVs. What a nightmare. From inside the Labor Party, what do people think of the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus? Remember the one who was screaming and carrying on in press conferences? If it was a Liberal minister, it'd be an act of misogyny, but of course it's just A day in the life of QC Doofus, Casey Doofus as it is now. He's apparently moronically arrogant and self-righteous. These are people who know him from inside the Labor Party, speaking to Christopher Daw via the Nightly. And clueless Claire O'Neill, exceptionally confident. Did someone say excessively confident? These are the views from inside Labor about their own team. Dunkley, please, please send them a message on Saturday. The Philippines president was in Canberra today. It's okay, blink and you miss it, and you're not all that up on international affairs because you've got a life to do, but there he was. And a Green senator, of course, had to make it all about them. Janet Rice is her name, and she decided to hold up a poster saying, stop the human rights abuses because, the ones that happen in China, they don't call out. The ones that happen in the Philippines. That's the centrepiece here. Well, the Senate decided to censure her because how dare she hold up a piece of paper while there's a joint sitting of Parliament?
Repeatedly, we see the Australian Greens act as a juvenile protest movement, not as responsible members of the Australian Parliament. Membership of this Senate comes with both rights and responsibilities. How we exercise those rights and how we exercise those responsibilities matters. These are choices each of us get to make. Nobody makes the Greens attend joint sittings. There is the option for them to boycott. They don't have to walk over there and attend a joint sitting.
But they censured the wrong senator. Well, I couldn't give a stuff about the Green senator, and obviously she's juvenile, making it all about her. The real problem in the Senate this week was the behaviour of Lydia Thorpe. Now, you may have seen this a couple of days ago, but I want to remind everyone, why did the Senate not grind to a standstill today and pass a censure motion about the behaviour of Lydia Thorpe? As things were wrapping up a couple of nights ago in the Parliament, Lydia Thorpe was there, stomping her feet, demanding to be heard, and just kept screaming until she was the one that was the centre of attention. She wasn't able to end up giving a speech, but here's part of her garbage in the Senate.
Senator Thorpe,
by the last speaker.
What? Well,
we were told
Senator
by the
Thorpe, sit down now. Senator Thorpe, you won't get the call at all unless you sit down now.
Oh, it continues where, despite the fact that it's not her turn to talk, and that's the way that it works, because the people who need to write down every word that has been said in the Parliament for Hansard, they only have to have one speaker at a time. Oh, but Lydia wanted to say something. She claims that it was about police and a member of her family. But I'm sorry, the way it works is that you have an opportunity to speak. If you miss that opportunity, sit down and wait for the next one. I don't know, but it's all about Lydia, and the Senate did nothing about her.
Stop interjecting, Senator Thorpe, and I will tell you what the rules are. Senator Thorpe, sit down now. Senator Thorpe, you will come to order.
Now, somehow she thought that if the President of the Senate, the actual presiding officer, their version of the Speaker, got back in the chair, then she would be allowed to speak. Guess what? No.
Senator Thorpe.
For your conduct to be reviewed by the President, who should be in the seat dealing with this issue right now.
Now, the Bureau of Meteorology. We've been talking about this for a while because from my mates that are storm chasers to people that are farmers, I've heard plenty of complaints about how often they get things wrong. Now, remember the fires that were in and around Ballarat a few weeks ago? We spoke about them at great length, at great detail. We all know about the role that weather forecasting has played over this summer, and the expectations were that it would be the horror summer, but it didn't turn out to be so. Well, those Ballarat fires were quite significant, and there was, of course, a loss of property. The response of the Prime Minister at the time was, it's a reminder of the need for us to be vigilant and continue the work and act on the threat of climate change. Guess what? Climate change doesn't seem to have played a role in how this fire started. You see, Victoria Police told us today that they are treating the start of the fire in and around Ballarat that prompted the Prime Minister to say that we need to remain vigilant and act on the threat of climate change may well have been suspicious, i.e. deliberately lit, i.e. not started by climate change.
We know that there was no dry lightning around at the time. We haven't been able to ascertain, we don't believe there was any tractors or other machinery working in that area at the time. So at the moment, we are treating that fire as suspicious.
But as for the Bureau and the complaints that people have been having there, now remember we were told about this super dry, super hot summer which was going to result in potential bushfires everywhere. In fact, this was the warning that was put out by the Bureau of Meteorology that led to a fair amount of public comment.
The outlook from the Australian fire agencies shows an increased fire risk for large areas of New South Wales, Queensland and the NT, plus parts of Victoria and South Australia.
Now, of course, that turned into quite a lot of media reporting. And now that obviously the summer was not the one that has been predicted, although, of course, it's got quite a warm sting in the tail as we are the 29th day of February, the final day of summer. The Bureau of Meteorology was in Canberra this week speaking to politicians where they have blamed the media for reporting on the very information they were handed by the Bureau of Meteorology. Let's talk Donald Trump, because it was a very good and a very bad news day for the former President of the United States and the inevitable Republican nominee. Now, of course, he is on his trajectory to a third shot at the presidency, one that he won, one that he lost, and we'll see what happens in November. But the Supreme Court has now stepped in and may well end up effectively delaying huge amounts of the federal cases that are against him, including the stuff in and around January the 6th. The expectation here is that the Supreme Court will now hear what lower courts have previously dismissed as the question of whether or not the President of the United States is immune from prosecution for anything they do while they are the President of the United States. I repeat, all lower courts have generally speaking said, no, that's not the case. If you do the wrong thing, if you do something criminal as the President, you can still be held accountable for it after you become a normal citizen. But that'll be tested now before the Supreme Court. And geez, didn't the lefties like that today?
Clarence Thomas doesn't want to die on that court, and he's getting old, and he's never going to retire during a Democratic president. So Clarence Thomas, one of the reasons why he's not recusing himself is that Clarence Thomas needs Trump to win again so Clarence Thomas can retire. And most likely, Sam Alito needs Trump to win again so Alito can retire instead of having to die on the bench. And so that's at least 2 of the 9 who have a vested professional interest in seeing continued Republican hegemony over this country. And that's not the first time this has happened. As we all know, Sandra Day O'Connor wanted George Bush to be president and thus appointed him president in Bush v. Gore because she wanted to retire under a Republican president. This is how Republicans roll.
You could just make anything up you particularly want to. I'm surprised he didn't throw in a claim of racism, which is normally what that bloke does when he turns up ever so regularly on MSNBC. As for the bad news that was around, a judge in Illinois has confirmed a plan from the Secretary of State to drop Donald Trump off the ballot, meaning he will not be able to run for the nomination or the presidency in the seat in the state of Illinois. That will be decided by the Supreme Court in the next little while. If they hold that up, well then obviously no chance of becoming the president. You can't appeal that decision. And he's been told he can't put down 100 of the, $500 million that he needs to pay the state of New York, who of course went after him on fraud charges despite the fact that the banks that he took out the loans on did not complain. They were paid back, yet still he was whacked with the best part of a $450 million judgment. He will have to pay up now, meaning he may well end up having to sell an awful lot of real estate, hopefully not the giant gold building on Fifth Avenue. Told you, good day, bad day for Donald Trump, as it always is. Quick break, back with more. Big debate, and it's all in the Man Cave. Looking forward to this one. And also, who do you think is the winner and loser of the week? Jump onto the socials. Nigel Farage as well, live from the UK. Big show, just getting started. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much for watching. Linda Scott, of course, represents local government at the National Cabinet table. She's passionate about all matters local government, but obviously is part of the Sydney City Council. Lovely to see her here, labour to her bootstraps. And he doesn't like the satellite delay from Melbourne. So here he is in the Man Cave. There's none other than the great Michael Kroger, who was very kind to me personally and professionally about our Dunkley pub test, which was fun the other night.
It was great.
So, Let's put them on the table. What's the feeling? What's the sense? There's a new poll which is out tonight again via this nightly website, which I've got to be honest is kind of taking a pick in all directions. Supposedly 50-50 once you squeeze the numbers, but Labor, having a bigger primary vote right now and a huge number of undecideds. So I think we can park that one if it's not willing to come to a conclusion. Michael, what was supposedly 52-48, an easy win for Labor, at some times has seemed like a potential squeaker for the Libs. Conventional wisdom seems to be Labor holds, but not by much. And that, of course, has consequences for the dozen or so MPs who are below 6% with their margins going into a general either this year or next.
They should win 52-48, Paul, which is a 4% swing against them. It shouldn't be worse than that. They could win 53-47, a 3% swing against them. But a lot of factors at play here. One of them, by the way, was the Labor candidate not turning up on your show on Monday night. Bad call. You know why? Because the polling booth and all the people talking about it saying, oh, she didn't turn up. I said, why didn't she turn up? And it gives Liberal Party members and spruikers a chance to say they're hiding her, she's no good, they didn't want to put her on for 20 minutes because she gave that shocking interview, etc, etc, etc. It's just a very bad look not to turn up, whereas our bloke was terrific. And I must say the Libertarian woman and the guy from the Australian Democrats, both through them, excellent.
And my point about this is that even if your advisors turn around and say, Sky News prime time, that's an away game, let's not go near it. If you can win one person in the room, let alone one person watching, then that is, you've got to fight for every vote, they keep telling us. They keep saying after every election, regardless of who wins or loses, regardless of whether you voted for us or not, we'll govern for all of you. Well, then turn up to some of the people who might disagree with you. Anyway,
correct.
Your sense of where we're going?
Labor winning, but I'm not so sure they're going to get 52. They might have a bigger than 4% swing against them. There's just an uneasy feeling down there, and the wind is blowing against him. It was blowing for him heavily in Aston, even though we had a great candidate there, but the wind is blowing against him in Dunkley, and it's possible he'll do worse than 4%.
Yeah.
Still win, but if he loses, by the way, that's a total catastrophe for Albanese.
Yeah.
The dogs will be barking all over Canberra and elsewhere if he loses, given that they've ploughed billions into these tax cuts, deliberately designed to induce swinging voters in Dunkley to support Labor.
Well, one thing that absolutely did land, and I'm saying from when we were talking to people in shopping centres and polling booths and obviously in our forum, was the reality that the tax cut's $14 a week for the mean wage earner in Dunkley, the sort of too little too late stuff that I've been talking about for a while, unprompted, was starting to come back as an idea. That said, Linda, a win is a win is a win. Is that the way that it's counted, and all the swing stuff is just sort of Canberra fiddle?
Well, look, I think the average swing in by-elections over the last couple of decades in Australia has been against the government of the day and up to margins of 7%. So that would mean a loss for Labor. So this has always absolutely been a nail-biter of a by-election, and I don't think anybody has claimed anything other than that.
I think that number's been debunked, but I'm not going to interrupt you too aggressively.
I think that the Liberals do have a strong candidate. He's a local mayor. I think we can all agree that local mayors make very popular candidates. Jodie is a fantastic local Labor candidate. She's very well known, very well liked. Nobody can replace Peter Murphy, but of course she was a much loved, very, very popular Labor MP who increased that seat to get the margin that it is. So, look, I am not willing to make a prediction. I think it will be very tight. I think the tax cuts have benefited Labor. I mean, every working Australian getting a tax cut, that's a compelling narrative for a government to have.
If it's a happy
and the Prime Minister's worked very hard.
The world. You have 2 trips through the drive-through and it's gone.
Well, every dollar counts, Paul. And, in an inflationary environment, every dollar counts, and every working Australian getting a tax cut, that's a big deal.
So I just want to explain to people, again, this will all be fought out over hours and hours on television. Can I just explain to you, right? If it is between a 0 and a 1% swing, the current number of Labor MPs in the Parliament who, if that was repeated at a general election, who would lose their seat, the government would automatically go into minority, right? There are 3 seats under 1%, then it's 4 that are under 2%, then you can add another several all the way through to about a dozen seats that are about 6% and under. So if it's line ball, a dozen members of the backbench go, gee whiz, something's coming our way. They're only in power by a couple of seats, so the orthodoxy being we're talking about a Labor minority at a general election, every one of them will be pushing bricks between now and 2025. So it brings us to this other poll that was around today in the Financial Review that, surprise, surprise, please rank. Cut emissions, keep a reliable system, or cut my power bills. Guess which one, of course, comes out on top. But, of course, they were all very clever in the machinery of Labor going into the last election, because they said, well, you can have both. We'll cut emissions and cut your power bills. But the Prime Minister, regardless of whether it's radio in Adelaide or Sky News, he won't repeat 275.
No.
Why is he allowed to get off the hook on that?
Well, mate, he won't at the election.
Yeah.
I bet the Liberals will be running that. I mean, this bloke gave everyone the impression at the election, cost of living is easy to fix. Just fix it. There's 275 coming straight away, 2025. That's coming, and it's really Josh Frydenberg and Morrison made a terrible mess of this. I can just flick the switch to Vaudeville and cost of living. That's one of the reasons people are so angry with him. They now say, this bloke defrauded us. Yep. This was all rubbish. He didn't have a plan at all. Because he said, I've got a plan to fix it. He had no plan at all. I've seen these things before. The advertising people get with you in a room, they work out what lines work, they do some polling, and they say, Albo, the best line for you is 275. Just repeat it over and over and over again. And because it can't be debunked or disproven, just keep repeating it, which he did 1,000 times. People sat at home believing this. What is happening in Australia today, I'll tell you this, and a lot of it's to do with the voice. There is a revenge of the working middle class against the elites. The voice. Look at all the people talking about renewable energy in favour of it. All people earning more than 300,000 or 400,000 a year. Correct. All right? The average person on 50, 60, 70,000, are they talking about it? Are they screaming in the streets saying we must reduce emissions? That Fin Review poll told you everything. 60% said the priority, please, can someone cut my power bills? I can't afford them.
But also, don't forget, one of the echoes that comes out of the voice and goes back through Dunkley is the Labor candidate spoke about how the result was sort of this giant act of white privilege. Dunkley voted 55% no. Again, these are little things that stick in people's minds. We'll see what happens on Saturday. But, Linda, we keep being told that the war has been won, the climate wars are over, all this business. I have argued for 10 years the cost of transition, unless you're willing to own up to it, is going to end up pissing people off.
That may well be the case. The transition to renewable forms of energy is a difficult thing to undertake, and it's especially difficult when you have to do it because we've had years and years of delay from a coalition government. So there's no argument that it is a difficult thing to undertake.
Turnbull's fault.
But you know what? Actually, people are going to have a look at the two alternatives at the next federal election, and they're going to listen for the first time in a while to Peter Dutton's ideas and policies for the future of our energy transition, and they're going to hear from him one solution that is not a real solution, and that is in putting forward nuclear power, a slow, incredibly expensive solution with no solution about where the waste goes. Australians will realise that in comparing those two, Labor's has always been the best path.
Sure, but what's the solution to where an old wind turbine goes? What's the solution as to where, the tens of thousands of millions of solar panels, largely made by slave labour in China, by the way, where they go?
These are great questions. I have literally been talking about them on behalf of local governments with Chris Bowen today. There are huge challenges ahead of us. We're working about...
Why do we sign up to one where we don't know where the waste's going to go, but you can't absolutely discuss the other one about where the waste's going to go that can plug into the existing network?
We're not talking about radioactive waste coming off a wind farm. We're not talking about waste that can
I reckon as a local council, you're not going to be building sporting
body.
Facilities over lithium batteries.
You're
not going to be like everyone knows what that problem's going to be.
The trouble that we would have with nuclear waste. I don't think they're a comparable argument at all.
Well, the French for years have had 70% of their electricity come from nuclear power. 70%. The French seem to be able to deal with the waste. They seem to be able to afford the bills.
Would you have it in your suburb though, Michael?
A small reactor? Well, in South Yarra, probably not, but you would have them in the places where there are coal-fired generators now, because that's more
Just
involved.
shove it onto the Hunter Valley and Sydney and the Latrobe.
There are no emissions. There are no emissions.
But what's your concern? You think they're going to explode and everyone's going to die in the Hunter Valley?
Radioactive. Those communities deserve better than being told, I'm sorry, you've got to have the nation's radioactive waste.
There's no radioactivity leaking into the air in nuclear power plants.
Peter Dutton, to push back against this stuff, turns around and says you can bid for one. If you want to bid for one, everyone in the local government area can have free power for the next 20 years. And you will see local council after local council
Even
after
Linda's
regional
council.
area going bang, bang, bang. Because they know that it's not Fukushima. They know that it's not Chernobyl. They know that. But that's part of the Liberal Party to push back on, because what Linda says will get plenty of people's heads nodding in and around the collective dinner table or the barbecue about, do I want this in my suburb? So I've got 1 minute left. So let us get to the winners and losers of the week. Who stands out for you as, and Linda, you can go first. Who was your winner or loser this week?
Oh, look, it's Mardi Gras and it's Albo's birthday this Saturday.
Oh.
So, I mean, I've got to say, Albo, happy birthday. Can I say, though, on a serious note, Mardi Gras is one of the biggest, most joyous festivals in the universe. It's such a wonderful event. I can't wait for this Saturday night. Sydney absolutely comes alive. Hundreds of thousands of visitors. It's a great night for Sydney. So Sydney is the winner.
Do you think
this
that,
week.
you know, a special medical attention will be there just in case Lydia Thorpe and her bung knees turn up? Because, I mean, that's why she apparently lay down in front of the float last year.
It started out as a protest. There's always protests as part of Mardi Gras. That's part of the joy.
Loser of the week, Nikki Haley.
Yes.
Not going well.
Yes.
Get those bags packed. Winners of the week, Linda. I think the Mardi Gras is a wonderful celebration of the free thinking and the wonderful democracy and tolerance we have in this country. And it's great to see all the Mardi Gras in the Arab countries in the Middle East. They have Mardi Gras in Tel Aviv in the Middle East, and in Arab countries they have not a single Mardi Gras.
Yep, there will be, of course, keffiyehs and all the rest of it, all on show. Anyway, thank you guys. Do appreciate it. Stick around. I think we're going to have a fun chat in the car park. Quick break. Back with more. Nigel Farage standing by after his face-to-face with Donald Trump, which we will discuss in a moment's time. Doesn't get better than Nigel Farage. He joins us now from London, host on GB News and the great freedom fighter that he is. And he hung out with the Trumpster again in Mar-a-Lago. How's he feeling? He's got a big bill to pay to a New York court, but he's on his path towards the nomination. That's almost certain. So how's he powering on?
Well, let's start with Mar-a-Lago, shall we? It is like a palace, literally like a palace. Ornate, lots of gold, incredible architecture. Probably the best piece of real estate in the whole of Florida, if not on the whole of the east coast of America. And just down the road, there are mansions that sell for $150 million. Yet the New York court that is now fining him $450 million valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million. That is what he is up against, an utterly corrupted judicial system in America. It almost beggars belief. And yet, you know something? Despite all of that, and despite the next trial starting on the 25th of March, and despite the fact that last week he gave 10 major speeches, and you know, by the way, a Trump speech is a 2-hour speech, right? Despite all of that, there he was in his office at Mar-a-Lago, laughing, joking, optimistic. I got to tell you, I've never met anybody more resilient. Well, I've taken a bit of stick over the years, but goodness me, his resilience, his sense of humour, his optimism, and do you know what? The campaign's going well. It's going very, very well. Not just in terms of the nomination, but actually, if you look at the polling in the key swing states, this is going very, very well. And unlike 2016 and maybe 2020, surrounding him now is a very experienced professional team. So, yeah, apart from all the aggro, apart from all the legal challenges, he's doing very well.
Now, I don't know whether you want to get into this or not, but I have to ask because we've got the proximity to you. to actually run a campaign, the actual machine of a campaign, you know it with Brexit, you know it with parties, you know it as an insider, right? There's literally maps everywhere and people working at, computers and somebody sort of magically trying to decide, if we do this one thing in this one suburb, then the flow on will be this, that and the other. Are there signs of that in and around Trump? Like, is he, I'm not asking you to say what those are, but is he talking about those things? Is he saying, look, we've got this little X factor here and we think this thing will help us there, we've got a good ground game in insert state, or he just trusts the machine to work it out and he's the front man of the band?
So the machine is still relatively small. He likes the idea that it's a relatively small machine, that he's got direct personal contact with it and the people that are part of it. And that's, of course, better, isn't it, than a big sprawling team. But what this one has got is discipline. I think before, there were quite a few people there who didn't really know what they were doing, who made lots of noise, who perhaps spoke to press. There's a sense of calm about the operation, a sense of calm about the plans. And don't for 1 minute, not for 1 minute, think he just lets the team get on with it without debating every, not fine detail, but every major strategic move. Now, he's plugged in, he's got people around him that he can really trust. And the good news that we've had here overnight is that Joe Biden has just done his annual medical and has been passed fit by the doctor. Now, I don't know what kind of doctor this is. I don't know what they must have paid him to come up with that conclusion. But of course, the one thing the Trump team want above all is for Biden to remain the candidate. Well, there you are. He's fit to be president. How about that?
Yeah, don't you like that it's optional whether he does the cognitive stuff or not? You would think that in the same way you've got to get on the treadmill and they've got to do the blood test, this would be part of it as well. Now, let's talk about the anti-Semitism, the madness that's running around in the streets of London and even made its way to Big Ben.
Yeah, absolutely frightening. From the river to the sea, projected onto the Elizabeth Tower, which houses Big Ben. Now, if that's not a genocidal taunt, I don't know what is. It's about the eradication of the State of Israel and its people. And yet, not one single arrest has been made. And Mayor Khan, Mayor of London, and of course the man who overall is in charge of London's policing, has declined to make any public comment on the matter whatsoever. This country that I've lived all my life in is today in greater danger than it's been at any point in my lifetime. Normal democracy isn't functioning. You're getting private dinners being held for Conservatives, holding fundraisers, suddenly being stormed by protesters and the police virtually standing by. We have a special election taking place in the northwest of England today. I think credible death threats against candidates, people fearful to go out and deliver leaflets. We are being run by a small, extreme mob. The police do not know what to do. And for now, normal democratic processes simply cannot function. It is a disaster.
The bloody oath, a disgrace. Just imagine if, Vote One Nigel was up on the Big Ben, what the reaction would be, and you'd be in the clink or the tower by the end of the night. Thank you, mate. Of course, we can all watch your show, GB News, on the Flash app here in Australia. Otherwise, plenty of stuff around on YouTube. Love you, mate. See you next week. Quick break, back with more. About 5 minutes away from the late debate. Like many a cynical person, I love the show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. One of its biggest stars has passed away, a comedian, Richard Lewis, who's been around for a very long period of time and basically is, in real life, one of the great friends of Larry David, and this is one of the many ad-libbed bits of gold that they made on that show.
Thank you very much. They love me. They love it. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
You don't have to buy any of them,
Well, I wasn't going to buy any, but still, I can congratulate you.
Are you vying for the title of the most pretentious man in the world?
What is this?
Yes.
I've had this for decades.
It looks like the little drummer boy's funeral. This is what he's wearing in the casket.
That's very funny. I never showed you my paintings at home because I knew you would, just mock me and destroy me. So
Anyway,
big night for me.
congratulations. This is quite a
for
display
support.
here.
Do you understand any of it?
No.
No, it's very confusing.
You don't understand?
I don't think you do either.
Let me show you one a painting I just sold.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Then maybe you could explain the mystery of that
I
one.
will. This is one of my favorites.
Such a good show. All right, that's our show for the week. We'll see you again on Sunday night. Full mop-up of what happened in Dunkley. Here's the late debate. Go Yankees.